Welcome to this AWS course on S3, and in this course we are going to first begin with the basic concept of S3, and then gradually we are going to increase the level, and towards the end of this particular course we are going to perform a project where we are going to use S3 along with the CloudFront distribution, with our SSL certificate, also from Route 53, and also we are going to set up our name server settings with the help of A records to deploy our project where we will be hosting a static website onto our S3 bucket. And there will be two more additional chapters which I'll be uploading, which will be creating an S3 bucket using Terraform and also using a CloudFormation template to create our S3 bucket. So there is a lot to cover and it is going to be a long session. So I also posted the timestamp into the description section for all those chapters. So if you are already familiar with those chapters, then please feel free to skip those chapters. So without further ado, let's start with our chapter 1. Let's start with a very fundamental question, that what is S3 bucket? In AWS, S3 stands for Simple Storage Service. So here I would like to highlight the term storage. So AWS provides you this service where you can store any kind of a file onto your S3 bucket. If I compare this service, which is a storage service from AWS, from a normal storage service, which can be your Google Drive, which can be your Dropbox, which can be your iCloud storage, where you can store your photos and videos directly from your mobile, even from your laptop and iPad to those cloud storage. But when you are working with the AWS and when you want to store certain kind of a data which is associated with your application, which can be text file, which can be a CSV file, which can be a JSON file, which can be a video, or any kind of a file you can store onto this S3 bucket when you're trying to run your applications. And the philosophy behind the S3 bucket from AWS is store and retrieve as much as you can. Now you know that you can store any kind of a file onto your S3 bucket, but there is an important concept like how these files are stored onto S3. So S3 bucket is not just a file storage, but it is an object-based storage. So whenever you are going to store any file or any kind of a data file onto your S3 bucket, then that particular file is going to be stored as an object, not as a file. As you can see onto the screen, I'm just trying to store various file formats or various files onto my S3 bucket, and each file will be stored as an object, and whenever that object is stored, it is going to get a unique reference, and with that unique reference you can provide a granular access to that individual object. Even you can control the access to a certain object within your S3 bucket. You can provide a read permission, you can provide a write permission, and even you can provide an update permission. Also, you can set up some versioning onto that particular object. So if someone is trying to modify it, then you can create a newer version of that particular object into your S3 bucket. So this S3 bucket is really powerful tool for storing such kind of objects, which can be any type of file. Just key thing to remember over here is that anything you're storing onto the bucket is not a block or not a file. It is an object which you're trying to store onto your S3 bucket. Now you know a little bit about the AWS S3 bucket. So let's do a small hands-on session where we can see like how to find the S3 bucket, how to create your S3 bucket, and how to navigate around our AWS console when you're trying to search for S3 services. So here onto the screen, you can see this is my AWS console, and when you are new to AWS, then you need to create your sign up account, and I'm assuming that you already signed up for AWS. And as soon as you sign up for AWS account, and once you perform a login for the first time, then you will eventually end up onto this particular dashboard. This dashboard might look different for you, but overall these core functionality of this dashboard is gonna be the same. So what you need to do if you're trying to log in for the first time, then in the search box here, you just need to type S3. And here you just need to click on this S3 icon over here. And that will take you to the S3 dashboard. And here you can see this is the S3 dashboard where you can manage your S3 bucket for storing the object onto S3. Alright, so once you log in and once you go to your S3 bucket dashboard, then you will have this kind of a look where you can see that if there are any S3 bucket which you have created in the past, then those S3 bucket will be visible over here. But the idea of this particular small demo before we proceed further into the complex topic is just to get yourself familiar with this S3 dashboard so that you just feel comfortable working by creating some S3 buckets. So here you can see on the left hand side you will see a various option like a bucket, access grant, access points, object lambda access point, multi-region access point. So you don't need to worry about this right now. The only thing which you need to worry about, since this is your first chapter, is the create bucket, because we just want to create our first bucket so that we can see how the bucket looks like. So what you need to do over here is just click on this create bucket, and that will take you to the next screen where you will need to specify some options. So the first thing which you will notice over here is the region. So here you can see this is telling me that I am into Europe, Ireland region. So whenever you work on AWS cloud, then you are working in a particular region. So here you can see on the top right section that there is certain regions which is highlighted over here, or which is selected for me by default. Because I am into the Europe region, so here you can see I have chosen the region which is Ireland. But in case based on your geographical location, just choose the nearest region for your based on your geographical location. So based on that, the same option will be visible over here, because S3 bucket is a regional service. So you need to present into certain region to create your S3 bucket. And this S3 bucket will be created into our Ireland EU West region. Okay, that you cannot modify. Only possibility is that you just need to switch this and go back to some other region. So if I go to Stockholm region, then you can see over here the region has been changed over here. All right, so let me get back to my previous region where I was working. So I'll just go back to Frankfurt region. And here you need to enter the bucket name. So the bucket name is a bit special over here, because bucket name you need to keep it unique. And what I mean by unique is that if you're trying to keep a bucket name which is already been taken by some other person, then it will not be possible for you to take that particular bucket name. So here I'm just gonna put, first of all, let's say test bucket, and see if that is available or not. So I will just for a moment, I'll just keep all of these options, and I will just first try to show you that if you take a normal name, or which is a very common name, then that bucket will not be available, or that bucket name will not be available. So here click on create bucket, and if you go on to the top over here, and here you can see bucket with this same name already exists. So bucket name is universal, and that universal name has to be unique so that you can create your own bucket. So to make it unique, what I'm just gonna do, I'm just gonna put test bucket demo. I'm just gonna put my website name, and then I'm just gonna suffix it with the date, and today's date when I'm recording is 30th of August. Okay, so that's the unique name I'm just gonna try to put for my bucket. I'm just gonna tell you later that how you can keep your bucket name always unique. That we will cover later on. But just for the time being, focus on the concept that you just need to keep the bucket name unique. All right. After that, you just need to choose certain options, which I'm just going to tell you one by one. So copy settings from existing bucket, I'm just going to skip that part. Object ownership, so ACL disabled. That ACL means access control list, which you can control certain accesses. If I show you, if I select this option, then here you can see that you have certain permissions like for object, and as I told you that S3 is an object storage. So here you can see bucket owner transfer, or bucket owner preferred. So if new object returned to this object specified the bucket owner, full control canned ACL. So if you're trying to create an object onto S3 bucket, then those can be controlled with ACL, which is access control list. Object writer, there are certain more granular permission, but just for the time being, let's stick with the default, which is ACL disabled. I don't want to create any granular access permission for my bucket. I'm just gonna stick with the default. The next block which it will tell is that block public access settings for this bucket. So of course, if you are creating the bucket within your cloud, which is AWS, then you don't want to make that S3 bucket publicly accessible. Otherwise, anyone with that bucket URL will be able to access your bucket. So here I'm just blocking all the public accesses for my particular bucket. So here you can see block all the public access option has been checked. After that, bucket versioning, I'm just not going to enable at this point of a time. We are going to take a look later how we can enable the versioning on the bucket. Tags, yes, so you can create a certain tags onto your S3 bucket. So here, if I go to the top, then I can just copy the name of this bucket, and I can go at the bottom. And here I can just create a tag. So here I'm just going to put a name and tag. Tag is just a unique identifier for your bucket also, so that you can tag that particular bucket with a certain key attributes. So which I have done right now. Okay. Default encryption. So again, so if you're trying to store something onto your S3 bucket, then you want to encrypt that particular object. You don't want to just store as is, otherwise it might not be that secure. So in that case, we are just going to enable this option to enable the server side encryption on our S3 bucket. And these encryption can be customized using your KMS key. KMS key is certainly a different topic, which I'm just not gonna touch right now in this S3, but those options can help you to enable the encryption onto your S3 bucket. Okay, and bucket key, I'm just gonna keep it enabled, and I'm just going with all the default option. I'm not making any customization as of now. And once you're satisfied with it, then just click on create bucket. And here you can see the message which it shows that the test bucket demo JHook 30 August has been created. And if I go again onto search box and type S3, again go to your S3 dashboard, then here you can see that this bucket has been created, which you can see I have highlighted. These are my previous bucket which I have been working in the past, but this is the latest bucket which I have just created. And if you click on this particular bucket, then here you will see there are certain objects browser, but these object browser is completely empty right now because I have not uploaded anything over here. Alright, so till now you have seen what is S3 and how you can create your first S3 bucket. The next thing which I'm just going to show you is like how you can upload the objects to your S3 bucket by uploading some files. So here into this S3 bucket, in the object tab, you will find an option for an upload. So click on this upload option. And here there are a couple of options. Either you can drag the file if you're using the browser, and otherwise you can just click on this add files so that it can take you to your laptop from where you can upload the files and the objects to your S3 bucket. So click on this add files over here, and I'm just going to go to desktop, and here I'm just going to store object 1 and object 2. These are just the images which I'm planning to upload onto my S3 bucket. And here I'm just gonna drag it over here so that it is visible. So here you can see there are a couple of object files, which is just an image which I'm planning to upload over here. Click on open. And here you can see both the file, which are just a PNG image file, has been shown over here. And after that, you just need to click on upload. But also one more thing that I also mentioned in the beginning, that each bucket gets a unique reference. So here you can see this is the like a unique reference or the URL for my S3 bucket, which we are going to use quite a lot later on to this particular session. So after that, what you need to do is that you just need to select the objects over here. So I have selected both the objects and then click on upload over here. And if your objects are small, then it will be really quick operation. But in case the objects are big, then of course it's going to take a little bit of time based on your bandwidth of your network. So here you can see our objects has been uploaded. I'm just going to click on close over here, and I'll just go back to my bucket dashboard once again and select the bucket. Click on this bucket, and here you can see both the objects has been uploaded to my S3 bucket. Let's talk about the scalability and durability of our S3 bucket, which means like when I'm trying to access my data, will it be available when I need it? So if we go by the official definition of our AWS and what they have promised, so they have promised 99.99 and there are 11 nines behind that particular decimal. So which means that our object is highly available once you store onto your S3 bucket. So that's the promise you get from our AWS cloud. Now you might be wondering that how can AWS be so sure about making our data available? So the reason behind is that our AWS S3 bucket store the data into 3 availability zone. So if I show you in the perspective, so if you take a look onto this particular diagram, I will just enable the scratch board also over here. So here you can see this is our S3 bucket, and this S3 bucket which I have created into my region, and that region I have chosen as a Frankfurt region. So if you create a single S3 bucket into single region, then that bucket is also available onto different availability zones. So which you can see over here. So this is availability zone 1, this is availability zone 2, and this is availability zone 3, which means your data is still available onto three different locations. So in case if one data center goes down or one availability zone goes down, then you still have these availability zone with you so that you can still fetch your data. So with that reasoning, your data is highly available once you store onto your S3 bucket. So that's one important concept which you also need to remember while working or while you're preparing for certain interviews or your certification. Let's talk about the S3 rules and the policies which you need to keep in mind when you're creating or working with your S3 bucket. So the first thing, the first rule is that your bucket name has to be unique. Although the S3 bucket is the regional resource, but your bucket name should be unique, because if the bucket name has been taken by someone else, then you cannot use that particular bucket name and you need to come up with your own unique name. So that's a rule number 1. Second, the buckets are regional. So once you create a bucket, then that bucket is associated with one region. So for example, we have created our S3 bucket into the Frankfurt region. So that bucket belongs to Frankfurt region. And in case if you need to create a bucket in some other region, then you need to choose that region and then go to the S3 and then you need to create your S3 bucket. And the third one is the object size. So as I told you before, whenever you work with the S3, then you can store or upload any kind of a file which is called as object to S3 bucket. And the size of that single object can be up to 5 terabytes. So you can upload an file or an object up to a size of a 5 terabyte onto your S3 bucket. And that's a single object I'm talking about. And you can have a multiple such a large object into your S3 bucket. So these are the few rules which you need to keep in mind while you're working with your S3 bucket. All right, so let's move to the next topic. And in this topic, we are going to take a look onto the AWS CLI and how we can access our S3 bucket using our AWS CLI commands. And all of the commands which we are going to see in this session are going to be available onto my blog. So here you can see this is the blog post link which I will publish and I'll post into the description section. So you can copy those commands from that particular blog post. So you don't need to worry about from where to fetch these commands. Okay, so how you are going to work with the AWS CLI? So you need to have a AWS CLI, which is like a programmatic way to verify the resources onto AWS. And AWS CLI is the go-to tool for these kind of a utility and for debugging purpose. So let's take a look how we can run our AWS CLI command to access our S3 bucket and the resources present within our S3 bucket. So here's my terminal, and here I have already installed the AWS CLI. And if you haven't installed the AWS CLI, then just please go to the AWS website and there should be an option for you to download the AWS CLI based on your operating system. It could be Windows, it could be Mac OS, and it could be Linux. So if I show you, then you just need to simply go to the browser, type Google, and here you just need to search for CLI download option. And here you will find all the options which are already made available from AWS for your installation, that is Linux, Mac OS and Windows. So just choose the suitable installation and then you can install the AWS CLI. So I'm assuming that you have installed the AWS CLI onto your local system, and then you can just run the command aws -- version, and it will show you that this is the version of our AWS CLI which is running onto your laptop or whatever work machine you are using. The next thing is the installation of a AWS CLI is not sufficient enough. You need to authenticate with your AWS account so that you will be able to access your resources. So how to do that? So for that, you just need to use the AWS configure command, AWS configure. And here you need to enter the access key, and after that I'm just gonna skip this part because I have already set up my access key and secret key. And once you set up this access key, then you need to provide the secret key ID as well. And from where to fetch this? So if you go to your AWS account, so here you can see this is my AWS account, and here if you go to security credentials, and here in the access key section, you will find the option to generate the new access key and secret key. You can click on this create access key, and then after that you will be able to generate your access key and secret key. So for example, I'm just going to show to you. I'll just copy this access key and I'll paste the value over here. And after that, it is going to ask me for the secret access key. So I have already set up, so I'm not going to modify anything over here. And once it is done, once you have entered the access key, secret key, there is one more attribute, which is a region, which you need to specify. So in the region section, you can specify the region where you want to work. So here you can see there are various regions. So I'm working in the Europe region. So I'm just going to specify Europe Frankfurt region. So in case if you are working in any other region, then just specify that region also, so that you can configure your AWS CLI using the access key, secret key and your region. After you configured your access key, secret key, region, the next thing which you need to verify is the connectivity before you can execute your S3 CLI command. So here onto this blog post, here I have already written some of the command which you can use as your test command to verify the connectivity. So the first one is AWS STS get caller identity. I'm just going to zoom a bit over here so that you can see. So just copy this command and it will tell you like from which account you are connected, and it will show you the ARN of that particular account. So if you go to your terminal and here just paste this command and hit enter, then here you can see this is the user ID, this is the account, and this is the ARN of that particular account. So which you can also see from here that this is the account ID through which I am connected. So which means you have successfully configured your AWS CLI to work with your AWS CLI commands. Let's move ahead. The next command which we are going to take a look, like how we can list the S3 buckets which are present or which I have created in past onto my AWS account. So here you can see this is the command list buckets, and the command is AWS S3 and then ls. So all the AWS CLI command starts with the keyword AWS, then the resource. And since we are working on to S3, so all the command will start with AWS S3. And in case if you are working with the EC2, then the command will change from AWS space EC2. So that's the normal syntax whenever you're working with the AWS CLI. So here the command is AWS S3 and after that ls. ls is for list. So I'm just going to copy this command. And I'll just go to terminal, I'll clear this screen and I'm just going to paste it. And here you can see there are 4 buckets which has been listed. So these 3 buckets are the old one which I have created in past, but this is the bucket which we have created in our previous chapter, which is test bucket demo jhook 30 August. And if I go over here in the search box, I can verify from the GUI console of AWS as well. So here you can see there are 4 buckets, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and the last one which we have just created yesterday. So this is the command which you can use to list all your S3 bucket present into that particular account within that particular region. Alright, the next command which we are going to take a look, like how to view the content present within the bucket. So the previous command where we have written AWS S3 LS was only listing the number of bucket present into my AWS account in that region. Now I would like to view the content or the objects present within my specific S3 bucket. And the command is really simple. So here the command starts with AWS S3 LS for listing, and after that you need to specify this URL, and this URL creation is pretty simple. You just need to prefix with S3 colon and then 2 forward slashes, and after that you can simply input the name of your bucket, and then after that you should be able to view the content present inside your S3 bucket. So let's take the same bucket which we have created recently. So I'm just going to take the bucket which is test bucket demo jhook 30 August, and here there are two objects present, which is object 1 and object 2. So here I'm just going to first of all copy this name of my bucket so that I can prepare the URL. So I'm just going to copy this one, go to my terminal, I'm just going to clear the screen, and then I'm just going to type S3 LS S3 colon 2 forward slashes and then the name of my bucket, and then hit enter. And here you can see I can view both the object present inside my bucket. So this is how you can just view the content present within your bucket. All right, so let's modify this particular AWS CLI command, and let's do a little bit more complex operation. So the next operation which I'm just going to show you is to move the content or copy the content from one bucket to another bucket. So here you can see this is the command which is like AWS S3 move. The keyword is MV, which is for move, and here you just need to specify the source bucket, and after that you need to specify the destination bucket. So here what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to move the object 2 from this particular bucket, which is our test bucket demo jhook 30 August, and here I'm just going to move this bucket object to this particular bucket. So let's try to copy the command and just try to prepare the command and then perform the copy or move operation. So first of all, what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to go to my terminal, I'll clear the screen, and here I'm just going to type the first command, which is move. After that S3 bucket which is my source bucket from where I want to move. Let's copy the source bucket name, and which is this one. After that you just need to provide the object name. So here I'm planning to move the object which is this one. Copy this object name, and after that I need to specify the destination bucket. So here I will just go back to buckets, and here I'm just going to go to this bucket, and here I'm just going to copy this particular bucket, and here I'm just going to enter the bucket URL, which is like this. Let's verify the command from our blog. So yeah, this is how it's gonna look like. So let's go back to terminal and hit enter. And here you can see it has moved that particular object. So let's verify it. And here I'm into my destination bucket, and here you can see there is already one folder inside that particular bucket. But if I refresh it, then my object 2 should be visible over here. And here you can see the object has been moved from my source bucket to this destination bucket, and which we can verify from our buckets, from our source bucket, which is this one. And here you can see there is only one object available over there. So this is how you can perform a move or copy object from source bucket to the destination bucket. Let's take a look at one more command where I'm just going to verify all the content present within my S3 bucket. So here the command is like AWS S3 LS, and after that the name of my bucket, which is this one, or the URL of my bucket, and after that I need to apply the keyword recursive so that it can list all the content present inside that particular bucket. So I'm just going to choose one bucket. So for this particular example, I'm just going to choose this old bucket, because here I have like a folder as well as one object, which is image, and then inside that folder there is one more folder, and there is one more Terraform state file. So it is a good candidate to view the content of this particular S3 bucket. So here I'm just going to copy this particular bucket name. I'll just go to my terminal, and here I'm just going to type S3 LS and then S3, then the bucket name, and then after that I'm just going to type recursive. And here you can see it is listing all the objects. So here you can see this is the object, and here you can see the Terraform state file which is present in all the folders, which is the first folder is DevOps project 1 and then Jenkins, and here you can see this is the Terraform state file present inside that particular folder. So this is how you can just use these kind of a CLI command to experiment and to work with your AWS S3 bucket. In this chapter, let's talk about the S3 storage classes. From AWS, there are 7 storage classes which are offered for S3. The first one in the list is the S3 standard. So that's the most frequently used S3 bucket for storing any kind of object on a S3. And what are the features of S3 standard? So S3 standard is the default storage if you haven't specified any storage class for your S3 bucket. Secondly, this is highly durable. Third one, it is really good if you are having a very frequent access to the objects which you have stored onto your S3 bucket. And last one is the low latency. It has the minimum latency across all the other S3 storage classes. The second in the list is the S3 standard infrequent access, where IA stand for infrequent access. So let's take a look what are the properties of that S3 standard IA storage class. So the first one is cost effectiveness. So this is going to be a little bit more cost effective compared with your S3 standard bucket. Secondly, it is really suitable for your infrequent access. If in case you are having a project where it doesn't require to be object really accessible frequently, then you should use for S3 standard IA, where it is supporting the infrequent access, or it is designed to support the infrequent accesses. And the last one is it is highly available. So that's the one more advantage you will get with your S3 standard IA. The third in the list is the S3 intelligent tiering, and as the name suggests, it's an intelligent tiering where you can vary your cost based on your usage. But let's take a look on the characteristics of this particular S3 storage class. So first of all, you can move the data between your different tiers. And secondly, you can optimize your cost based on the usage. So if you are having a high usage, then your cost will vary. It will be a little higher, but in case if your storage or the usage is very less on the storage, then your cost will effectively go down. So that's the intelligent tiering from S3 storage class. Fourth on the list is S3 one zone IA, where IA stand for infrequent access. So let's take a look onto the characteristics of this particular storage class. So the first one is it is a low cost. Second one, it is suitable for your infrequent access, where you don't need a frequent access to your S3 objects. Third is single availability zone. So as the name suggests, it's the one zone IA, one zone infrequent access. So that's why it is only available into one availability zone. And the fourth one is reduced durability. So your data will not be that durable onto this S3 storage class. Now fifth on the list is S3 Glacier instant retrieval. So now we are starting with the Glacier storage classes. So whenever we are talking about the S3 Glacier storage classes, then we are trying to store our archival data into our S3 Glacier storage class. So now when we talk about the Glacier instant retrieval storage class, then there are certain characteristics with it. So the first one is all the S3 Glacier are cost effective for your archival data. Secondly, specifically this particular instant retrieval, that you can retrieve your archival data in the millisecond. So that's the advantage you will get over here. And the third one, which is quite obvious, that we are using it only for our archival data. Now sixth on the list is S3 Glacier flexible retrieval. So again, the only one characteristic which will change over here is the retrieval time. So here you will have a flexibility to change the retrieval time, which can vary from minutes to hours. And again, we are just focusing here on retrieval of our archival data. And finally, the seventh on the list is S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So if you have a data archive, which is archival data, of course, which is like you don't need for a long time, then you can use the S3 Glacier Deep Archival. And the retrieval time for over here is around 12 hours. So within 12 hours, you will get your data back from your archive, which is stored onto your S3 Glacier Deep Archive. Alright, so now we have seen the S3 storage classes in the previous chapter. So now let's talk about the cost and the pricing associated with those S3 storage classes. So here I have shown a very graphical representation on how the cost will vary when you will start using your different storage classes for your applications. So I will try to first explain like how the cost vary and what are the best strategies to use and calculate the pricing for your S3 storage classes. So on this graph, you will see that I have drawn the high side of it and there is a low side of it. So there is a two distinct difference when you are trying to use the S3 storage classes. So when you start using the S3 Glacier, so here you can see this is the differentiation over here. So the price will start dropping significantly because S3 Glacier, as I told you, is going to be used for archival purpose. But if you are using towards on this side, on the left hand side over, then the cost associated with your storage classes will increase. So here the S3 standard will be the costliest one if you're trying to use it, because those are quite used very frequently for frequent data access. But as you move towards on this side, I mean from here this side, then the cost will depreciate for your storage classes. So S3 standard IA, S3 intelligent tiering, S3 one zone IA. So all of those storage classes will cost you a little bit lesser. Apart from that, not only the storage classes, there is a S3 storage calculator also, which is available, which can help you to calculate those costing. Let's take a look onto that calculator so that you can calculate the exact amount and price which you need to pay. Now I have shown you a brief overview like how costing will vary, but let's take a look onto this cost calculator from AWS to calculate the exact pricing with our different storage classes of S3. Here onto the screen you can see this is the AWS official calculator, which can be used not only for S3 pricing, but it can be used for any other resource or any other services which you are trying to consume on AWS. But for this session or this chapter, let's try to focus on the S3 services. So here on this calculator, I'll post the link of this particular website or the URL from AWS into the description section so that you can use for your own application calculation. Okay, so here you just need to click on the create estimate, and here you have a various option. So here search by location type, and there is a search all services. So I'm just going to go with the search all services, and here find the service. So here I'm just going to type S3. And here you can see this is the option which is popping up. I'm just going to click on configure over here. And here you can see different storage classes which I have just explained to you. There are quite a few new options also available over here, but I'm just trying to give you an idea like how you can calculate for your own use. So I'm just going to let's take a look onto the diagram once again. So here you can see this is S3 standard. So let's try to calculate the pricing for our S3 standard storage class. And here I have just enabled that option, or I have just checked this option for S3 standard. And to give you the reference, so we are just going to calculate the same amount of data which we are trying to store on the S3 standard as well as other Glacier options. So first I have selected the S3 standard, and here it is going to ask like enter the amount of data in GB. So let's take a rough example like 1000 GB I want to store or I want to put it for a month on a S3. And after that, sorry, I have just clicked on collapse, but I'm just going to open it once again. And if you go further down onto the show calculation, then here you can see the pricing. It is $23 for a month. And if you want to go more granular, like if you want to like perform some kind of a put, copy, paste, delete kind of a operation on your S3 bucket, then also you can customize this calculation and it will give you the different amounts for that particular uses. So here, just for an example, take a reference that we are calculating on 1000 GB for a month on a S3 standard storage type, and the amount which comes out to be it's $23. Okay, so now we have seen the calculation for our S3 standard, which is on a higher side, which is on this side. So now I will try to show you the calculation for our S3 Glacier. I'm just going to show you for, let's say, either this one, or we can take any of these three which are on a lower side and see what the difference comes out when we are trying to use our Glacier storage class for our archival data. Let's start over, and I'm just going to create the again a one calculation for our S3 Glacier storage type. So here I'm just going to click on the create estimate, and remember we are just taking the same data, which is 1000 GB for our reference, so that we can evaluate the difference between S3 standard storage class and the S3 Glacier. So here I'm just going to search for the service, which is our S3, click on configure over here. And here from the checkbox over here, I'm just gonna select for, let's say, S3 Glacier, and yeah, there are various S3 Glacier available. So let's check this one, S3 Glacier Instant Retrieval. And here the amount of data I'm just gonna enter is over 1000 over here, which is correct. And then I'm just gonna go below and click on show calculation. So here you can see the difference. Now it is showing you 4 USD per month. So that's the drastic difference which comes in when you are trying to use the different storage classes for your AWS S3 storage. But yeah, as I told you, the Glacier services are not for frequent data access. It is just for your like archival data. So that's how the calculation will vary for you. So based on your needs, just try to pick the storage class which is cost effective for your use case. If you are trying to use the S3 standard where you don't have a frequent data access and you don't need high availability, then I would not recommend to use the S3 standard storage class. So use those parameters, use this calculator, and try to find the exact storage class which suits your application. And I hope this calculation will help you to budget your AWS S3 resources. Moving to the next topic, and the next feature of our S3 I'm talking about is the Requestor pay. Since we have talked about the cost and the pricing, how we are going to calculate, so I thought this could be a suitable topic to cover over here. Now, what's the meaning of Requestor pay? So here on this diagram, you can see there are two AWS accounts, which is account 1 and there is an account 2 over here. So account 1 is the owner of your S3 bucket, but account 2 is not the owner of your S3 bucket. So suppose if you're trying to deploy or run an application which is hosting some of your content on your S3 bucket, which is this one, and this S3 bucket is need to be accessed by some other person, which is in this case is account 2. So you are owning the S3 bucket, but account 2 wants to access some of the objects which are present into your S3 bucket. But cost wise, what you want to do, you don't want to bear the transfer cost of your S3 bucket object. You only want to bear the storage cost. So here you can see you are storing your content in this bucket. So you only want to pay for the storage. But in case if your client is trying to access the objects on that bucket, then you don't want to bear that cost. So in that case, you can enable the requester's pay option, which implies that when a requester is trying to access, so suppose this user is trying to make a request to access the bucket, then that request will be charged, and that request will be charged for that account which is requesting for that particular object. Let's take a look onto the S3 bucket, how you can enable the requester pay option onto your S3 bucket which you are owning. So I'm just going to go back to my AWS console, and in the search box, I'm just going to type S3, click on this S3 bucket over here. And in this S3 bucket, this is the S3 bucket which I have created. So I'm just going to click on this S3 bucket. And if you go to the properties over here, and if you scroll down further in the property section, then you will find the option for a requester pay, which you can see. You just need, here you can see, first of all, it is disabled right now. So you can just click on edit, and here you need to set enable and then click on save changes. So now you can see that you have enabled this option, which is requester pay. So once you enable this option, then it will give you a feature or ability to charge for that particular object which has been accessed by some other account. Of course, you need to set up those permission for that particular account to access those objects present inside your S3 bucket. So that way you can share the cost towards the requester account, and you don't need to bear the cost associated with a data transfer. You only pay the cost with your S3 bucket storage. So that's a feature which I thought could be a good fit after showing you like how you calculate and price your S3 bucket storage. In this chapter, we are going to talk about the S3 object tagging. As I told you before that on your S3 bucket, you can store the objects and those objects can be of size 5 terabytes. So those are really big objects you can upload onto your S3 bucket. So if the objects are bigger, then you need to have some unique identifier which you can have with your S3 bucket. Of course, S3 bucket by itself from AWS provides you the unique identifier for your objects, but apart from that, you can also create your custom tags which can be used for grouping those objects for within your S3 bucket. So in this session, we are going to talk about the object tagging which can be done onto the objects which are present inside your S3 bucket. So here onto the screen, you can see you can create a various tags on all the objects which are present onto your S3 bucket. So for example, on this bucket, we can see there are 3 objects, and on those 3 objects, you can create the tags. So you can assign some name or meaningful value onto those particular tags for those particular objects. But you might be wondering that why I'm so interested into tagging and creating so many tags for those objects. So here are some quick examples like where you can use those tagging. So if you want to move a group of objects from one bucket to another bucket, and those group of objects can be identified with the help of tags. So you are just going to use the tag feature of your S3 bucket to tag those objects so that you can easily identify those objects. So that's one example. Apart from that, there are lots of reporting, inventories, also can be prepared with the help of tags. And tags are not inherently bad. It can also be used for cost calculations and other purposes. So there are various applications and uses which you can derive from your tagging which you are doing onto your S3 objects. Here onto the screen you can see I have account 1 over here, and here is account 2, and if you want to move some of the objects from one S3 bucket from here to here, then there are certain tags which you can use if you have already tagged those objects. For example, here I'm just planning to move only the object with the tag 1. So once I have created these tags on my objects which are present into my source bucket, then I can easily pick those objects and start moving those objects to another S3 bucket. That's one example I have shown you, but there are various examples and various applications of these tags which can be used inside your S3 bucket. Let's take a look onto the AWS console and how we can create a tags onto our object. So this is my AWS console, and in the search box, if you type S3 over here, then go to your S3 dashboard. And here, this is the test bucket which we have created in the past. So here you can see there is a one object which I have already uploaded. So I'm just going to click on this object over here. And here in the properties section, if you scroll down further, then you will find the options for tagging. So here you can see there are tags options which are available. And one thing which you need to keep in mind that you can create up to 10 tags onto your S3 objects. So here what you need to do to create a tag is just click on edit over here, click on add tag over here, and here you can enter the tag name. So tag names are based on the key and value. So you need to create a key and the value which is assigned to that particular key. So here I'm just gonna specify that object type. So here I'm just gonna specify PNG, and here I'm just gonna add a tag over here, and I'll add only one tag over here, and then click on save changes over here. So once I saved it, and if I close this option, and if I close this option also over here, then after that you can just need to refresh this page, and then you can verify the tags which I have just created. So if you go further down over here, then you can see the object type PNG has been created. And why I have created this PNG tag over here, so that I can identify that this particular object is of type PNG. So that's the purpose of the tagging. So with this feature, you can categorize your objects present inside your S3 bucket, which can later on be used for various operations, cost report preparation, moving of the objects, and many more. So that's one feature of tagging which is really useful for you. In this chapter, we are going to talk about the S3 bucket policy and how we can impose those policies onto our S3 bucket. And to understand that, we are going to take an example, and in this example we are going to take two accounts with our AWS. So here you can see onto the screen on the left hand side, this is my root account where I will be creating an S3 bucket. So this is going to be our S3 bucket, and on the right hand side there is one more IAM user account which is also an AWS account, but that is not a root account. So this user will try to access this particular S3 bucket which is present onto our root S3. So for that, we are just going to create some permissions and policies, and we are going to assign a user of that particular account to access this particular S3 bucket. And that we are going to impose using the permissions and the policies. Let's go through those resources one by one. So first we are going to take a look onto the S3 bucket, for which we are just going to create those policies. So this is my AWS dashboard, and here you can see this is my S3 bucket which we have created in this particular sessions. So now we have seen this is the bucket, and this bucket I would like to give a permission to a different IAM user or different account, AWS account. So I'm just going to show you the other AWS account or IAM user account. So I just need to go to IAM section over here. And here you can see there is one more user, and this is rahul.dev user. So if you compare with my diagram over here, so right now I am working in this root account which you can see on the left hand side, and rahul.dev is another IAM user account which is not a root account. So as of now, this is the rahul.dev account, and which doesn't have any certain policy attached to it, but it is just a very simple user account. So now you have seen that we have a S3 bucket, we have a root account, and also we have an IAM user account. So now I would like to show you the console of our IAM user account, which is rahul.dev account. So I'll switch over to one more incognito tab. Just give me a second, and which is this one. Yeah, this is the one. So here you can see this is another AWS account, which you can see from the top that this is a rahul.dev account. I'm just going to increase the font over here. Just give me a second. I think it's much better now. So let's go to S3 over here and see if that user has a permission to view the S3 buckets or not. So if you go over here, click on the buckets, and here you can see you don't have a permission to list the bucket. So this is the test case or the test scenario which we are just going to try it out with the permissions and policies. So this is my another user account. So I'm just going to drag this window to other side of my screen. And now I'm back to my root account. So here you can see the difference, that is rahul.wag, which is my root account for AWS. And if I show you again, just so that everything is clear to you, this is rahul.dev account, just not to get confused. All right, so now we have seen both the accounts, and now we need to provide a permission so that rahul.dev account can access the S3 bucket, which is this one, which is our test bucket demo jhook. This is the bucket for which I want to grant the access to that particular user. All right, so now how to create the roles and the policy for that particular S3 bucket. So here in the AWS, there is an IAM section from where you can create the roles and the policy. So go to the IAM section, and here, first of all, we are just going to create a policies. And here you can see there are some default policies, but we are just going to create one custom policy for our this particular use case. So here I need to select the service for which I need to create the policy. So here I'm just going to create a policy for my S3 bucket. So I'm just going to select that, and here I need to specify the permission. So as of now, I'm just only giving the list permission. I'm not giving any read permission to that particular policy. So the user will be able to list all the buckets, and he will not be able to perform any kind of operations onto that S3 bucket. We can customize these policies later also. So select all those, and all the resource section, let's keep, I don't want to make it very specific. I'm just going to keep it all. I'm just going to explain like how you can restrict to that particular user later, but let's put it all over here. Click on next. And here you can see this permission, not permission, but for the policy for this S3 bucket is full list. And here we need to enter the policy details. So I'm just going to name the policy like S3 list policy for Rahul Dev. So I'm just making the name more suitable for that particular user so that I can identify that this policy belongs to that particular IAM user. Okay. After that, what you need to do is just click on create policy. And here you can see our policy has been created, and which you can search like S3 list. And here you can see this is the policy which we have created. Now, after creating the policy, we need to assign that policy to this particular Rahul Dev user. And to do that, again, go back to your AWS console and go to the user section over here. And here you can see there is only one user which exists into my root account, which is Rahul Dev. So I'm just going to click on this particular user. And in the permission section, we need to attach that policy. So before that, I would like to show you once again. So here you can see this is my rahul.dev user account. And if I refresh it, then I'm still not able to access that particular S3 bucket. Here you can see permission denied to list buckets. All right. So I'm just gonna go and attach that policy which we have just created. So click on attach, add permission, click on add permissions over here. And here I just need to click on attach policies directly, and here in the search box you can type for S3 list policy Rahul Dev. So I'm just going to select this policy, click on next, and click on add permissions. And now you can see this permission has been attached, and this particular user, which is rahul.dev, now have this particular policy, and this policy allows to list the bucket over here, which you can see all of these permissions. Okay, and here you can see the policy had been attached. That's the green message which you can see on the top. So let's get back to our another browser where I have opened that particular account, and here you can see this is our rahul.dev account, and here it was not having the permission previously. So I'm just going to refresh this page once again, and here you can see the bucket is now accessible to this particular user. And if I click on this particular bucket, then here you can see the content of my bucket. But if I try to access this particular object, then I will not have a permission to access that particular object. If you see that if I try to copy this URL and if I paste it over here, then it will give me access denied, which you can see over here. So if I try to zoom in over here also, so here you can see it is access denied. So what it means? So it means that I can list the objects, but I cannot access those particular object inside that bucket. So I have the list permission, which allows me to view the bucket, view the content of the bucket, but I cannot read individual objects. So in that case, you can just go over here and you can still like this particular policy, which is list. So you can just click on go and edit, and then you can just keep on changing these policies over here. So here you can see this is right now into the list bucket policy. In the visual editor, you can go there, and here you can further customize to allow further more permission onto this particular policy. So this is how you can just like share your S3 bucket using the policies to some different account and some different resources. Till now we have seen like how to create your S3 bucket and how to make it accessible within your accounts. But we have not seen any example where I make my bucket as a publicly accessible to internet. As of now, till now, I have shown whatever the demo, all those demo I have blocked the public access. But now I'm just going to show you like how you can enable the public access to your S3 bucket. So here what we are going to do, we are not going to use any other account for this particular demo, but here we are just going to we already created a S3 bucket into our root account, but now we are just going to enable the public access. So anyone from internet should be able to access that particular S3 bucket using that bucket URL. Let's head over to our AWS S3 console again, and this time I'm just going to create a fresh bucket, and this bucket is going to be the public bucket. So to do that, what you need to do, you just need to click on create bucket over here, type in the name. So here I'm just going to put test demo jhook public bucket 1. And after that, I'm just gonna keep everything as is. I'm not gonna change anything, but only the part which is I'm going to change is the public access setting. So I'm just gonna uncheck that particular box so that it is publicly accessible. And here you can see that the turning off public might result in this bucket and objects within becoming public. So that's a warning message. So you just need to acknowledge that one. And after that, you just go ahead and click on create bucket. I'm not changing anything, keeping everything default as is. So here you can see our bucket has been created. Click on view details, and here you can see the bucket has been there, and this bucket is public over here. But apart from making this, creating this bucket and unchecking this public access checkbox while creating the bucket, you also need to fix the permission. So to do that, what you need to do, you just need to click on permissions over here and go to the bucket policy, and here you just need to click on edit. And here we need to generate the policy so that all the resources present within that particular bucket becomes accessible, and we define the action as well as resources. And how to generate this particular policy? So the easy way which I found is that you can use the policy generator. Click on this policy generator. Here click on S3. Principal, I'm allowing everyone. So put star over here, select action. So here I'm just gonna put select on a list actions. So if you go further down over here, and there should be list my bucket, list bucket, list bucket, multi-part upload. I'm just gonna select these are the options, and ARN, you just need to copy the ARN of that particular bucket from here, go over here and paste it over here. Click on add statement, and here you can see our policies and the permissions. Click on generate policy, and here you can see this is the policy which we have just generated. So now what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to copy all of the content from here. I'll just select these content and go to my policy and paste it over here. And after that list, I think this I cannot use it. So instead of that, I'm just going to copy one more permission, which is this one. Okay, so I cannot use list my bucket permission. Instead, I need to use the list bucket version. So these are the few errors which you can easily identify over here. So now we have policy in place. So here I'm not putting any restriction, which you can see. So here I'm just allowing everyone to access this particular bucket with these permissions set. All right. So you go ahead, click on save changes over here, and just verify that permission has been applied. So here you can see the permission has been applied. Now after that, how to access this particular bucket objects or view the bucket details publicly. To do that, what we need to do, we just need to upload something onto our S3 bucket. So here I'm just going to click on upload, select add files, click on object one, click on open, select this option, and then click on upload. I'm just pretty much keeping the things very simple over here, just we followed in the previous lessons. So now we can see that our object one has been uploaded. Click on close over here and select this object, go to copy URL and then go to the new tab. And now with the URL, we should be able to access that particular object or the bucket. So here you can see I'm trying to access the bucket, but the permission which I have given is only list. I cannot access the object. So here we need to remove this object because we are trying to access the object directly. So just remove this and just hit the URL. And here you can see that our bucket is accessible and what are present inside the bucket is also accessible, because this permission is only allowing me to list the bucket, and what are the content inside, I can also list those content. But if I try to access any object directly like I did previously with the object one, then it will not be accessible. So this is how you make your S3 bucket public, and be careful whenever you're making your S3 bucket public, because you might be breaking some of the security flaws unless and until that's your actual use case where you need to make your S3 bucket public. Let's talk about the one more concept in the S3 bucket is the pre-signed URL. So what are the pre-signed URL in S3 bucket? So pre-signed URL are some authenticated URL which you share with anyone. So once you upload some objects to your S3 bucket, then using the pre-signed URL, you can share that particular object to someone else. And that URL will have certain conditions, and those conditions can be a time-bound condition. So you can create that URL with a time bound that particular URL will be accessible for 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 60 minutes, 1 day, 2 day. So those kind of privileges you get with the pre-signed URL. Let's head over to our S3 console and see how we can create the pre-signed URL. So here you can see this is the bucket which we have created and this is the object. So I would like to create a pre-signed URL for this particular object. So you just need to select this object, go to the action, click on shared pre-signed URL, and here you can see you can customize the settings for your pre-signed URL. So here you can specify like a minutes and hours. So let's say for example I would like to specify the 5 minute, and after that click on create pre-signed URL. And here you can see the pre-signed URL has been created. Just copy from the clipboard and now you got this pre-signed URL. And once you create this pre-signed URL with the 5 minutes, then after 5 minutes this URL will not be valid. So if I try to open that, here you can see this is the pre-signed URL for that particular object, and this object is accessible for me right now directly. So once this 5 minute is expired, then this URL will not be usable for me. And these kind of features which you can use where you need to time box certain objects which you are planning to share with someone else. So this is a very small concept of pre-signed URL which you will get along with your S3 buckets. Let's move to the next chapter, and in this chapter we will be talking about how to secure your S3 bucket. And in this chapter we are going to talk about the few points. So first one, we are going to start with our AWS SSE S3 encryption. Then after that we are going to take a look how you can encrypt your S3 bucket using KMS key. Then also we are going to take a look like in transit encryption, which means that how you can disable the HTTPS request for an object. So there are two ways you can access your object through your S3 bucket, using HTTP and using HTTPS. And of course, for security purpose, I would like to use the HTTPS method instead of HTTP. So that is what we are going to see inside our in transit encryption point. Fourth one is the bucket versioning, so that you can enable the versioning and you can upload the multiple updated versions of your object, and you will keep the history of previous versions of your object. And at last we are going to take a look on the bucket replication job, so that you can replicate the data or the objects from one bucket to another bucket. Let's start with our one of the first basic encryption, which is our SSE S3 encryption in your S3 bucket, and how you can enable that option onto your S3 bucket. So here we are onto our AWS S3 dashboard, and here in the previous chapters we have created this bucket and how to enable that SSE S3 encryption option. So what you need to do, you just need to click on this bucket over here, go to properties, and here you will find the option for a default encryption. So in the default encryption, you just need to click on edit over here, and here you can see the option for your SSE S3 encryption. So this is the encryption which is by default enabled. If it is not enabled for your S3 bucket, then just please go and check, and through this option you can enable this SSE S3 encryption onto your S3 bucket. So this is the first option which I have shown, like when you have already provisioned or when you have already created your S3 bucket, then this is the way you can enable this option onto your S3 bucket. Now talk about the second option when you are trying to create your fresh S3 bucket. So how you can enable this option. So if you go onto your S3 dashboard, and there you will find the option for a create S3 bucket. So click on this S3 bucket. Once you fill in all those bucket name and all those details, then in the bottom you will find the option for a default encryption. And here you will also find this radio button where you can select that server-side encryption with Amazon S3 using SSE S3. And once you enable this option, then all of your content within your S3 bucket will be encrypted. So that's the second way through which you can enable this particular option when you're creating your fresh S3 bucket. Now let's move further and see the next option. The next option I'm talking about is the KMS key encryption, which is SSE KMS key encryption for your S3 bucket. So in this option, what happens is you create your own cryptographic key, which we call it as a KMS key in AWS. And once you create those keys, then you're going to use those keys to encrypt the data present inside your S3 bucket. So whatever data you upload onto your S3 bucket will be encrypted using that particular KMS key. So let's take a look how we can enable this option and how we can encrypt the data using the KMS key. Alright, so here is my dashboard for S3. So first I'm just going to show to you how you can enable the KMS key encryption for your existing bucket. So here, this is the bucket which I am just taking the same bucket for this particular KMS key encryption also. So click on this S3 bucket, go to the properties again, and again go to your default key encryption, which is, let me go. Yeah, this is the one. Default encryption setting, and here you will find option for edit. Click on edit, and here this is the second radio button, which is like a server side encryption with AWS KMS key. So once you select this option, then in the bottom you will see you need to select the key. If you have already created those key, then you can select those existing key. Otherwise you need to create your fresh KMS cryptographic key. So here there are two options. Choose from existing KMS key. So here you will find a drop down option, and here you can see there are a couple of keys which I have already created, which I can reuse over here. But instead, if you have not created any KMS key, then there is an option enter AWS KMS key ARN. So suppose you have not created any KMS key, then there is an option create KMS key over here, and that will take you to a new service of AWS, which is KMS key. We will cover the KMS key later, but the KMS keys are generally a cryptographic key which you can use to encrypt the data. So here what you need to do, you just need to select the type of KMS key which you like. So like a symmetric, asymmetric, encrypt, decrypt, what kind of a usage you want to define with your key, and then after that you just need to click on next, and then it will help you to generate your KMS key. So with this option you can generate your own key, and once you have generated your own key, then you can come back over here. You just need to click on this ARN. So let me see if I have some of the key. So once you generate your key, then here you can see this is the one key which is already there. So you just need to copy this ARN from here and go back over here and just paste those ARN over here, and with that you will be able to encrypt your S3 content using your own customly generated KMS key. So this is the option which you can use, and the same option is also available when you're creating your fresh bucket. So the same options of KMS key for using your existing key, as well as you can create your new own key for encryption of your S3 bucket. Now moving further, the next topic which I would like to explain to you is in-transit encryption, which is this one. So what is in-transit encryption in S3? So as I told you before, that whenever you upload an object to S3 bucket, then that object gets an URL, through which URL you can access that particular object. So which I can show you. I'll just close this one and I'll go back to my S3 bucket. So this is my S3 bucket, and here this is an object. If you click on this object, then here you will get this URL. So this URL is always associated with an object to access that particular object. But if you pay attention over here, then this URL is HTTPS. But also the same URL can be used without S. So you can access the same object using HTTP, which is not a secured method. So what we always recommend is that you always use HTTPS for any access of your object from your S3 bucket. So with the help of in-transit encryption, I'm just gonna disable the HTTP. We only want to have the access to our object using HTTPS. So that's what in-transit encryption means in our S3 bucket. Let's take a look how we can enforce the HTTPS for our S3 bucket to access the object present into our S3 bucket. So here, this is my bucket. So I'm just going to click on this bucket, and let's go to the permission section. And here we need to go to the bucket policy. Click on edit over here. And there is a one policy I'm just going to copy from my notepad, and I'm just going to explain to you how it is going to work. So here is my encryption. Sorry, I just need to recopy it. I'll just copy it and I'm just going to paste it over here. So here, this is the policy which I'm enforcing onto my S3 bucket. So here you can see this is the ID, which you can put any name of your choice. Here is the permission. The effect is allow, and what I'm trying to do, I'm just allowing any resource within your AWS to access the S3 bucket. And here the action which is I'm allowing over here is the get object, and the bucket which I'm restricting is this one, which is the test demo jhook public bucket. And the condition, this is the important part. So here I'm telling that AWS secure transport true, which means I only entertaining HTTPS. I'm not entertaining HTTP. So only HTTPS request will be entertained and replied back. So this is the policy which I'm enforcing. And in case if you don't want to enforce this policy, then you can just simply type false over here. But let's take a look, save the changes and go to objects. Click on this particular object and copy this URL from here and go to new tab, paste the URL, and here you can see we are able to access that particular object. And now what I want to do over here is that I just want to remove the HTTPS. So just remove this HTTPS and then try to access the URL, and here you can see the access is denied. So this is how you can secure your in-transit encryption for your S3 bucket, so that you are only entertaining HTTPS rather than HTTP. Moving further, the next topic which we are going to discuss is the object versioning. And this is very simple thing which you can enable onto your S3 bucket. So with that, every object which is going to be uploaded onto your S3 bucket will have a previous version, so that you can recover the old version of that particular object in future also, so that you have the backup of all the versions of your that particular object which you have modified over the time. So let's take a look onto this, how we can enable the S3 versioning onto our bucket. So here you can see this is my AWS S3 bucket. So click on this S3 bucket, go to properties over here, and here you will find the option for a bucket versioning. So by default it is disabled. Of course you can enable this option when you're creating your bucket for the first time, but since I have not enabled it, so that's why this option is disabled. So here what you need to do, you just need to click on edit, and here you just need to click on enable this option. And after that it will just show you that you might need to update your lifecycle policies of your S3 bucket, which is fine, but I'm just going to click on save changes over here. And now we have enabled the versioning onto our S3 bucket. After we enable the versioning on our S3 bucket, let's try to upload the multiple versions of a same object. So here let's take a look onto the object which is I have already uploaded, which is object 1. So click on it, copy this URL from here, and let's verify what it shows. So here you can see this is the first image of me which is there, and I would like to upload another version of the same object where I will put a date over here in that image. So I'm just going to close this one over here, and after that I'm just going to go to the bucket. Here I'm just click on upload, add files over here, and here this is the object which is like having a date onto that particular image. I'm just going to click on open, and here I'm just going to select that particular object over here. I think it just went this way. So here you can see, and after that I'm just going to click on upload option over here, and here you can see it is uploading. It has successfully uploaded it. Click on close over here, just refresh this page. And after that you just need to click on this object 1 over here, then click on this versions tab over here, and here you can see there are two versions. First one is the null version, and this is the second version which I have just uploaded, which you can verify the timestamp. So right now it is 11 o'clock, and last version which I have updated is 22:59, which is just like a minute ago. Okay, so let's verify the image by accessing it. So here this is the URL. I'm just going to copy this one and go to the new tab and hit enter. And here you can see this is the date which I have posted over here. This is just an old image, so I just wanted to show you the difference. So previous version, didn't had that date onto that image, and now this new version has a date onto that particular image. So this is how you enable the version, and all the objects will have the previous copy of that particular version so that you can retrieve those versions whenever you need it. So this is how you're just going to enable the versioning onto your S3 bucket. Let's talk about the last point, which is like a batch replication and the batch job of our S3 bucket. So here in this section, what we are going to do, we are going to create two buckets. One is the source and one is the destination bucket. And we are just going to copy or replicate the content from our source bucket to our destination bucket. So before we create our replication, let's upload few more objects onto this S3 bucket. So click on upload, add files over here, click on temp JSON, temp MD. I'm just gonna drag this window over here, and test YML. Click on open over here, and here you can see there are few more files which I have uploaded. Select all of those, click on upload. And here you can see all of those files has been uploaded. Let's close this one. And here you can see there are 4 objects now which we have just uploaded. So now the next thing which we need to do is we need to create a one more bucket, and that's our destination bucket. So click on, I'm just going to copy this name, and I'm just going to keep it a similar name but with the destination word into it. So click on create bucket. I'm just going to put the name, and here I'm just going to put destination test demo jhooks, same bucket name. ACL, I'm just going to keep everything default over here, and block public access, yeah, that's fine. Versioning, I'm just going to enable the versioning over here. Tags, if you like, you can keep it. Encryption, I'm just going to keep the same encryption which I have onto my source bucket. If you are using the KMS key, then just use the same KMS key, and that same KMS key should be applicable for your destination bucket as well. Then bucket key, I think I'm just going with this option, so I'm just gonna keep this option also default. I'm not going to change anything, and then just click on create bucket. So here you can see our both the bucket has been created. So this is our destination bucket, and this is going to be our source bucket. Now, how to create the replication or a replication job for replicating the data from source to destination. So what you need to do, you just need to click on this source bucket over here, go to management, and here you will find a replication rule over here. So here you need to click on create replication rule, and here you need to enter the rule ID. So I'm just gonna enter the name of my bucket. So let's put replication for test demo bucket and the name of the bucket. Okay, it's just up to you how you want to keep it. So I'm just going to keep this name. Status enabled. After that, source bucket, which I have already specified, this is going to be my source bucket. Then I need to also choose the rule scope, like what you want to copy. So I'm just going to apply all the objects in the bucket. So whatever this rule I'm creating, it is applicable for all the objects present inside that bucket, because I just want to copy all the source object from my source bucket to the destination bucket. After that, choose the bucket in this account, and you can specify the bucket. So here just click on browse over here, and here I'm just going to select the destination bucket, which is this one. Click on choose path. After that, IAM role, so I'm just gonna select create new IAM role. So it is just going to create you a IAM role which is responsible for performing this copy operation. Encryption, so I'm not using any KMS key, so I'm just not gonna check this option. I'm just gonna stick with my SSE S3 encryption. Additional replication option, so there are few more options they are providing from AWS, like replication time control, replication matrix, delete marker replication, replica modification sync. So these are few more options if you want to explore and customize your replication further. But let's keep it simple, and let's click on save over here. And here you can see in the background that replication rule has been created, but replicating existing job. You can enable one-time batch operation job from this replication configuration to replicate objects that already exist into bucket. So now it is asking you to start or one time do the replication from source to destination. So I'm just gonna do yes over here and click on submit. And here you can see this is the actual configuration which we need to click on save now, right now. Let's re-verify everything and all task and complete. I don't need any report from it. If you need, you can just specify the option over here. Permission, I'm just gonna stick create new rule over here and click on save over here. It is asking me for report, so let's choose let's say I just want the destination bucket to be for this report. Then click on save over here. And it will take a couple of minutes to persist these changes, and after that we will be just get redirected to another page, which is like a batch operation page. And here you can see the status. This is the job ID which I have just created. If you click on this job ID, then you can check the status. So here you can see it is preparing, and after a few minutes it will be in a ready state, and then this batch job will run. So let's refresh this one. It's still preparing. So I'll be back once this status has been changed. So here you can see the status is now active, and the time in active state is 0.6 seconds. Let's refresh this one once again. It's still running. So yeah, I'll let it finish and I'll be back once this replication job has done his task. All right, so now my replication job has just finished. So let's take a look onto our destination directory and verify the details. So here you can see all the objects which I have just copied or uploaded into my source bucket are now available into my destination bucket. And along with that, also this job ID, here you can see this job ID logs are also available, manifest.json. So this is how this replication job will work, and that will copy all the data from your source to destination bucket. And the way I have shown you that all the logs of that particular job will also be available if you have specified the destination S3 bucket as your same destination bucket where you are trying to copy the objects. So this is all about how you can create your replication rule, and you should be able to now replicate your data between the buckets. Let's talk about the S3 bucket and the CloudFront distribution, how you can leverage the advantage of CloudFront distribution to distribute your static content which are present or stored inside your S3 bucket. Let's take a very basic example to understand this CloudFront distribution along with our S3 bucket. So we have created an S3 bucket which is present into somewhere in the US Pacific region, and also we have a user which is present into our Asia Pacific region. So if a user is trying to make a request to access that particular object, and that S3 object is present in the US region, then it will create some latency because that request is traversing through all the way from Asia Pacific region to all the way till US data center. So that's quite create a delay in the how he is trying to access that particular object present into that S3 bucket. Now here comes the AWS CloudFront distribution, which helps you to mitigate this kind of latency and the delay in the request processing for your S3 content. So they have a concept of an edge location. So here you can see, although your bucket is present into the US region, but you have an edge location, and these edge location can be used as temporary storage for serving your static content, so that whenever a user make a request, so that request will not go directly to S3 bucket, but it will go directly to the nearest location which is present onto that geographical, based on the geographical location of that particular user. So here you can see this user is present over here. So, and here is this edge location on the map. So here I'm just taking a very hypothetical scenario, but in reality it works the similar way. So this edge location is quite near to him. So whenever a user make a request to that particular S3 object, then what will happen? That particular object will be first cached or copied to this particular edge location. So the first request might take a little time because that's the first time that user is trying to access. And once user has accessed that particular object, then that object will be cached over here, which is this edge location, which is nearest to that user. And from Going forward, if subsequent request comes to that particular object, then that request will be served from this edge location to that particular user. So what advantages does it brings in? Now we know the concept. Let's take a demo how to implement the CloudFront distribution along with our S3 bucket. So here I'm just going to switch to my console, and here you can see this is the same dashboard where we were creating our S3 bucket. So here what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to use the same bucket, which is this one, which I have been using in the previous session in this course. So I'm just going to stick with this bucket, and we will try to access this particular object using our CloudFront distribution. So right now you don't need to change anything. You can keep your bucket as is. I'm just going to show you like when you need to update the policy after CloudFront distribution once you have created the CloudFront distribution. So right now we just need to jump to the CloudFront distribution section. So here in the search box, just look for the term CloudFront. And here you can see this is the link. So just open that one into the new tab. And here you can see I have not created any CloudFront distribution yet, so everything is empty over here. So here you need to click on create CloudFront distribution. So click on it, and here you need to specify the origin domain. So once you click on this origin domain, then it is going to ask which S3 bucket you want to pick. So here I'm just going to use the test demo JHook bucket which I have created. So I'm just going to select that one. Origin path, it's optional, but I would say whenever you are working, then just be careful with the name. So here you can skip the origin path, but you can keep the meaningful name in the name section. So here I'm just going to put some meaningful name to our CloudFront distribution. So let's put test demo S3 bucket. All right. After that, origin access. So how would you like the access to that particular S3 bucket? So I'm just gonna put origin access control setting because it is recommended, and you will have a more granular control on how you are allowing CloudFront distribution requests to access the object. So I'm just gonna stick with this origin access control setting. And this will generate a policy for us which we will reuse inside our S3 bucket. I'm just going to show that part also, but just keep in mind, instead of public, if you really have a need for a public making your CloudFront distribution and your S3 bucket publicly available, then you can go with the public option. Otherwise, I would always recommend to go with the origin access control setting so that you can control the access and the request coming to your CloudFront distribution as well as your S3 bucket. All right, let's select that option, and here in the drop down here you can see this is the one origin access control setting which I have created previously, but let's go ahead and click on create new one. And here you can see here you can enter the name. I'm just gonna stick with the default one, and here signing behavior, so I'm just gonna keep sign request recommended setting. All right, then click on create over here. So let's put the name already exists because yes, I have created it. So let's put bucket, and here I'm just gonna put number 2 so that I can make it unique. Although it's a bad naming convention, but just keep some suitable name based on your project name and create some OSC based on your project name. So here just click on create over here. Here I'm using the origin access control setting now. After that, enable origin shield. I'm just keeping everything default over here. I'm not just gonna modify everything. And here the most important thing, which is default cache behavior, because as I told you, like once you create your S3 bucket and CloudFront distribution, then your content will be cached onto your edge location. So here we are trying to define our caching behavior. So how we are gonna entertain the request coming to our CloudFront distribution. So here I would stick with redirecting HTTP to HTTPS so that I always serve the HTTPS traffic from our S3 bucket and from our CloudFront distribution. So I would go with this setting, allowed HTTP method. So here if you are only providing a read access, then that would be sufficient. If you have a certain request which wants to update the content onto your S3 bucket, then I would like to go with this option, which allows you to get a put, post, patch and delete operation as well onto your S3 bucket. So here get and head methods are cached by default because get and head methods, like get is just a read-only request, so it will automatically cached onto your edge location. If you have, you can enable this option as well. Apart from that, there are a few more settings like a cache key and origin request. So here there are some cache policy, cache optimize. So I'm just going to go with the recommended for S3 setting. I'm not going to modify anything over here. And apart from that, there is the origin request policy, which is optional. If you want to keep something onto it, then just go ahead and do it. Otherwise, you can just leave it as default over here. Apart from that, there are some functions association which are also optional, so I'm just not going to change those one. The second most important thing over here is the web application firewall, which I would always recommend to keep it enabled. Otherwise, you might have a difficulty to restrict the requests coming onto your S3 and CloudFront distribution, because there might be some robot traffic which might lands up on your S3 bucket and which might incur a little bit of cost, data transfer cost to you. So instead of that, just use the WAF so that you enable the WAF onto your S3 content and CloudFront distribution so that you can filter those bot traffics. So that's a one recommendation from my side. And after that, just keep everything default. In the one more settings which I always recommend over here is the use all edge location for best performance, so that it is available throughout your world and you don't need to worry about like which region is cached, which edge location it is using. Just keep this option and all of your edge location will be available for you to serve the content. Okay, after that there is a one more setting which is CNAME. So I'm not covering the CNAME over here because I have a one more topic to host our static website onto our S3 bucket in this particular course. So we will touch this topic during that time. So as of now, we will just focus on S3 bucket and our CloudFront distribution. Okay, so since we are not using the CNAME, so I'm just going to skip the SSL certificate part as well. We will cover that part during that session. Apart from that, support HTTP version. If just go with the HTTP2, I don't see a problem with that one. And after that, click on create distribution. And once you click on create distribution, then what will happen, it will just start creating the CloudFront distribution for you. Here you can see it is started creating the CloudFront distribution. But apart from that, it will also give you some policy for S3 bucket, which I told you earlier. So here you can see in the yellow bar, this is the policy which you need to copy from here, and then you need to go to your S3 bucket and go to your permissions, and here in the bucket policy, click on edit over here, remove any previous policy and paste it over here. So let's take a look onto this particular policy. So here it is just SID, which is a meaningful name, which is allowing CloudFront service to use our S3 bucket. So here the service is CloudFront distribution. Resource is this particular bucket, which is our S3 bucket, and here it is the conditional check over here that it is only allowing this CloudFront distribution to use our S3 bucket. So that's a policy which we are trying to impose on our S3 bucket. So now this S3 bucket is only accessible via CloudFront distribution. No one else can access this S3 bucket. All right, with this policy. And after that, just click on save changes over here. And here you can see successfully updated our S3 bucket. Apart from that, here you can see our CloudFront distribution is still deploying. I'm just gonna close these boxes over here. I'm just gonna refresh it. And here you can see it is still deploying, and this is going to be our URL for accessing our CloudFront distribution. So I will wait for a couple of minutes and I'll be back once this deployment is ready and we can start accessing our S3 bucket content using our CloudFront distribution URL, which is this one. All right, so after a few minutes, my CloudFront distribution has been deployed, and here you can see this is the ID of my CloudFront distribution and last modified timestamp, which you can see over here. And if you go to the distribution, then here you can see it is enabled right now. So now I can use this CloudFront distribution distribution URL to access my S3 content. So here, just take a look once again. So here is the distribution domain name. So I'm just going to copy this one. And here in the test bucket, I'm just going to first access this object1.png. But let's take a look first by accessing that domain name of my CloudFront distribution. So paste the URL, and here you can see access denied first of all. Because I'm trying to access, there is not any default page for my CloudFront distribution. So I need to provide the object name. So here I'm just going to provide an object name, which is this one from my S3 bucket. I'm just going to copy this one, go over here and slash and put it this one over here and hit enter. And here you can see we are able to access our content from my S3 bucket using the CloudFront distribution. The second verification which you can also do is by removing the HTTPS and just simply type HTTP. So it should redirect this request to HTTPS. And here I'm just going to hit enter, and here you can see it is again redirecting me to HTTPS. So this is how this whole CloudFront distribution works along with your S3 bucket. So right now, whatever the nearest edge location which is present based on my request will be served from that particular edge location. And now we have also enabled the HTTPS over here. So now our CloudFront distribution is more secure along with my web firewall. So now I hope this small demo on how to set up your CloudFront distribution along with your S3 bucket will help you to understand this concept. And if you want to learn more about the WAF firewall rule, how to set up those, then I have already uploaded a video onto my channel. Then please go out and check that particular video, which is quite useful to understand the WAF firewall on AWS. In this session, we are going to talk about how to set up your static website using your S3 bucket. So what you're going to learn at the end of this session. So first thing, the first core service which you're going to learn is S3. Second, you're also going to learn how to set up your CloudFront distribution along with your S3 bucket. The second part where we are going to work with the certificate, and for that we are going to use the AWS certificate manager to generate the certificate and also configure those certificate inside our Route 53. Because we are going to purchase, or we have already purchased a domain that we are going to configure into Route 53 so that our DNS server works, and with the help of that particular domain we should be able to access our website which is present inside our S3 bucket using the CloudFront distribution. So there is a lot to cover in this session, and all the timestamp you will find into the description section, and every concept and every service which we are going to use, we are going to start from the scratch so that you get more comfortable knowing those concepts and knowing how to use those services, specifically CloudFront distribution, certificate generation and Route 53. But before that, let's try to map everything onto this diagram so that we can understand how this flow is going to work. So here you can see this is the picture which representing how the distribution and deployment of our static website will work with the S3. So here on the left hand side you can see a user which is having a domain which is a jhook.org. It is just a sample domain I have taken. So for this demo I'm just going to use demo.jhook.org. And once this domain is used or entered by a user on a browser, then that request will land onto the Route 53. And then Route 53 will redirect that request to the CloudFront distribution. So the CloudFront distribution is going to help the user to reduce the latency between the request to the resource. So here you can see there is a map which I have prepared. So in this map there is a S3 bucket which I have created in Europe region. But this particular user can be present anywhere in the world. So how to reduce the latency or the response, or to shorten the response time for his request. So what we are going to do, this CloudFront distribution is going to cache those particular objects onto the edge location which is nearest to this particular user. So although our bucket will be located into Europe region, but the request will be served from the edge location which is nearest to that user. So for example, if this user is present into Australia, then the nearest edge location of that particular user, which could be Australia, is chosen, and then content will be served from that particular edge location. So that's why this CloudFront distribution is really useful when you have your static content, and those content delivery can be made really quick and the response time can be reduced for that particular user. Also, one more thing I would like to highlight about the request flow. So here is how this will work. So user is going to enter the domain, which is right now showing jhook.org, but our case we are going to use the demo.jhook.org, and that domain I have already purchased from Squarespace. And once that request lands onto this Squarespace, there we have already configured the name server, which I'm just going to show to you later. Don't worry about it. And once that request is forwarded to the Route 53, then it's going to look for the hosted zone into Route 53. So hosted zone is again the name server setting from our AWS, which also I'm just going to show to you right after this slide. And there it is going to find all the details about the domain registration on the Route 53, which we have did, and from there it is just going to find this. After finding this name server setting, it is going to find the A record, and this A record will point to the CloudFront distribution, which you can see. If I would like to highlight over here, then this is the CloudFront distribution, which is I'm going to show you. So this is how this whole request will route, and after that it is going to be landed onto our S3 bucket, which is in our case this one. This is our CloudFront distribution, and this is our S3 bucket. All right, so now I would like to show you the domain which I have purchased from Squarespace. And if you take a look onto this flow, the Squarespace is the first one which comes over here. So if I switch over here, then you can see this is the jhook.org. Sorry, I will just close this one, jhook.org, which I have purchased from Squarespace. And here there are quick thing which I need to be very careful about the DNS settings. So here you can see there are a couple of options, so which is DNS setting and DNS name server. So we need to look for DNS name server. And here you can see these are the entries which I'm just going to show to you also. So first of all, this is the domain which I have purchased from Squarespace, and these are the domain name server settings for this particular domain. But how it is related with our Route 53. So let's switch to our AWS console, and here just go for Route 53 over here and click on this Route 53. So here you can see there is a one hosted zone which I have created. So just click on this hosted zone over here, and here you will see a domain, not domain, but it's a hosted zone. So click on this hosted zone. This hosted zone I have created, which you can also create by going over here and then simply click on this hosted zone, and here you need to enter the domain name. Okay, so this is the simplest way I have created this hosted zone. So click on this hosted zone, go to this domain, and here you will find, once you create any new hosted zone, then you will find this name server setting which is created for you from the AWS. You don't need to create this one. It is just created for you by AWS. So these are the records which is available into hosted zone, and I have copied these records from here to our name server settings of our Squarespace, and these entries are exactly same. So here you can see NS1238 AWS DNS, and you will find same thing, NS1238 AWS DNS. So all these four settings of name server are present into our Squarespace domain from where I have purchased it. So if you take a look back again onto diagram, so we have the domain, we have registered with Squarespace, and also we have a private hosted zone which is jhook.org, which is configured onto our Route 53. And you might be wondering that, hey Rahul, I have not purchased my domain from Squarespace, then what to do? So every domain registrar or from where you have purchased the domain always have these kinds of settings. So always go into that, whether it's a GoDaddy or whether it's a SiteGround, whether it's a Azure, whether it's a GCP, from wherever you purchase that domain, you will always find the DNS setting and domain name server setting onto those website domain provider. So look for those settings and then go there and try to modify those domain name server settings based on this Route 53 hosted zone. Okay, now we know like how the request flow of our Route 53, Squarespace and hosted zone, all three glued together. The next thing is what we are going to implement in this whole implementation is we just need to create our Route 53 bucket first of all. Once we create a Route 53, then we are going to focus on the CloudFront distribution, which is going to be our second part. And finally, we are going to take a look onto this Route 53 and CNAME. So this is how the sequence will work for this whole implementation. Let's switch to our AWS console, and here in the search box, I'm just going to create first the S3 bucket. So click on this S3. And here you can see there are few S3 bucket which I have already created. So I'm just going to create a new S3 bucket, and I'm just going to name that S3 bucket as a demo1 jhook.org, because I have already used the demo.jhook, so I cannot reuse that particular name because the names in the S3 buckets are always unique. So here I'm just going to use the demo1 jhook.org. And after that, I'm just going to keep everything as is. I'm not going to change anything. And after that, I'm just going to click on create bucket over here. Here you can see our demo1 jhook.org bucket has been created. So I'm just going to open that particular bucket, and here you can see there is nothing present onto this particular bucket. So now what I'll do, I'll just try to upload one sample HTML page, which could be a home page of my website or a blog. So for that, I'm just going to click on upload over here, and here I'm just going to click on add files, and here I have already created an index.html, which is this one. I'm just going to open it, and here I'm just going to upload that particular page to this S3 bucket. Click on upload over here, and here you can see our object has been uploaded. Close, and here you can see our index.html has been uploaded. Now after uploading our S3 object, which is our index.html, if you take a look onto the diagram, then we need to work on the CloudFront distribution. So the question is like how we are going to create the CloudFront distribution. So for that, click on this search box over here and type CloudFront. Click on this CloudFront over here. And here we just need to click on this create distribution, because we are going to create our fresh CloudFront distribution for this particular demo. So click on this create CloudFront distribution option over here. And here we need to select the origin domain. So here we need to select the source bucket from where we are going to serve the content. So this is going to be our demo1 jhook.org S3. Select that one. Original path, so if you have something, then you can keep it, otherwise it is just an optional thing which you can skip. Origin access, so the access to the S3 bucket, would you like to keep it public or private, or managed through origin access control setting? So instead of keeping it public, I would always recommend you to keep it like a origin access control settings, so that you create a policy so that only CloudFront distribution will be able to access that particular bucket. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how you can do that. So here for that, I'm just going to copy this name, which is the exact bucket name, and which is also going to be my domain name. So here I'm just keeping this setting as an origin access control setting. Here you need to click on create new OAC, that is origin access control. So click on this one. And here you can see the name, which is exactly the same, and sign in request recommended. So you just need to simply click on create over here. And here you can see, and here there will be an option that you must update the S3 bucket policy later. So let's go ahead, and once we create this distribution, then it will give us that particular policy which we need to update to our S3 bucket. Okay, that's fine. After that, I'm just going to keep everything default. I'm not going to change much of the things over here, because if you're just getting started with the CloudFront distribution, then you can just keep most of the things default, and then you can learn eventually to customize those parameters. Okay, after that, I just want to secure my CloudFront distribution and the domain request. So I'm just going to redirect HTTP to HTTPS. So this is the option which I'm just going to enable it. After that, allowed HTTP method. So since it is a static website, so I'm just going to stick with the get and head option. I don't want to put, I don't want to enable the put, patch and delete operation onto my CloudFront distribution for S3 bucket. After that, cache key origin request, I'm just going with the recommended setting over here. And after that, function association, this is optional, so I'm not going to change anything, but the key thing which I need to change over here is the web application firewall, sorry. So here I'm just going to enable this one. After that, the edge location which I talked to you previously, so the edge location, I'm just going to enable it for all over the world. So here I'm just going to select all edge location instead of North America and Europe. So that I have selected. After that, certificate, which is important now. So since this is a fresh subdomain, which is a demo1.jhook.org, which we are trying to create, so for that we need to request a certificate, which is going to be our SSL certificate. So here in the drop down, I have created these certificate in the past, but I would like to create a fresh one for demo1jhook.org. So click on this request certificate option over here, and here you just need to request a public certificate. Click next. Fully qualified domain name, so I'm just going to put demo1.jhook.org, and I'm just going to use the DNS validation method because I already have a parent domain which is jhook.org created in my private hosted zone, which I can show you again. So here if you type route 53, then here you can see in the hosted zone, we already have a hosted zone with the name jhook.org. So I can create a certificate for my subdomain, so which I'm doing it for demo1.jhook.org. All right. A validation DNS, I'm just going to keep it. I'm just going to show you like how to validate it also. And after that, I'm just going to click on request over here. And here you can see our certificate has been requested. It will take a minute or so to get it fulfilled. I'm just gonna close this one, and here I'm just gonna refresh it. And here you can see the status is pending validation. So how to validate it? So for that, you need to click on create records in Route 53. So here in the Route 53, if you go over here, then here you will see there are two CNAMEs which I have previously working. So there were two CNAMEs, but once I create a new certificate, then I need to import that certificate into Route 53 so that it can validate that certificate. So for that, I'm just going to click on create a records in Route 53. So once I click this one, then it is going to create one more CNAME record over here for that particular domain, which is our jhook1 demo1jhook.org. All right, so here I have selected this domain, click on create records, and here you can see it has been requested. If you go over here, refresh this one, and here you can see there are 3 CNAME records now, which you can see over here, 2 previous one and 1 is the new one. All right, and here the status is pending validation, so it might take a couple of minutes to get it approved. And here you can see the status is issued right now for this particular certificate, and this has been validated. So now we have successfully created a certificate, and that certificate we have also imported into our Route 53 for our jhook.org. Now after creating the certificate, let's get back to CloudFront distribution, and here if you can see it was jhook and demo jhook.org. So I have already created a certificate, so let's refresh this option over here and click on drop down, and here you can see there is one more certificate which is available for this distribution. Select this certificate over here, and after that just go with the TLS 1.2, which is most recommended and latest one, and supported HTTP version, so I'm just going to keep it HTTP2, and I think we are good with the CloudFront distribution settings. So click on create distribution over here, and once you create the distribution, then here you can see it is saying that it is in a deploying state, this CloudFront distribution. So this CloudFront distribution might take somewhere around 3 to 5 minutes to get it deployed fully. But also one more thing, I have already told you that it will create a OSC policy for your S3 bucket. So here you can see this policy has been created. So copy this policy from here, otherwise you will not find an option later. And after that, you just need to open the S3 bucket and click on this S3 bucket over here. Go to the demo1jhook.org S3 bucket, go to permissions over here. And here you just need to click on edit bucket policies, and here you just need to paste the policy. And this policy is really simple, so which is allowing only this particular bucket to be accessed from this particular CloudFront distribution. It is as simple as that. Any other request will be get rejected, and here it was only allowing to get the object, not to modify, not to delete, and not to update. Okay, so this policy has been updated over here. Go ahead and save the changes. So now your S3 bucket is also quite secured, and it is also only entertaining a request coming from CloudFront distribution. Alright, so after a couple of minutes, my CloudFront distribution is fully deployed, and here you can see the status of my CloudFront distribution. Now it is not saying deploying, it is actually deployed right now. And once it is deployed, then you will see a distribution domain name, which is this one. So just copy this domain name just to verify that our CloudFront distribution is able to access our S3 bucket or not. So copy this domain name URL for our CloudFront distribution, go to browser, and here just suffix it with the index.html, because if you take a look onto our S3 bucket objects, then this is the index.html which we are trying to access. And it should be accessible once we hit this URL. And here you can see it is accessible. So this is the home page of your website, which could be a potential website. So it is now accessible. So which means our CloudFront distribution is working perfectly fine with my S3 bucket. All right, so now what we have covered throughout this particular implementation. So we have covered this section also. We have distributed or not distributed. We have created S3 bucket, and then we have used the CloudFront distribution to create our edge location. So edge location will be taken care by CloudFront distribution. So but we have configured our CloudFront distribution along with our S3 bucket. So this part is also done right now. The next thing which we are going to focus now is onto our Route 53. Now we need to bridge this domain. We have the subdomain, which is demo1.jhook.org. So this domain we need to bridge with the CloudFront distribution over here. So this is the bridging part we need to do, and this bridging we will do with our Route 53 by creating an A record. Go to Route 53 over here. Go to hosted zone now. To create that A record, click on this hosted zone name over here, and then click on create record. Here we need to choose the simple routing. Click on next, and here click on define simple record. And also, if you are not familiar with the Route 53, then I have also prepared a dedicated session only for understanding the Route 53. Then just go ahead and check that particular session if just to get yourself familiar with the Route 53. I'll post the link into the description section for your reference. Okay, so now our domain subdomain name is demo1jhook.org, and A record type I just need to create, and here we need to choose the point. So now this A record in our Route 53 is going to point to the CloudFront distribution. So the point which we are going to use is our CloudFront distribution over here. Okay, after that we need to choose the distribution. So here you can see which we have already created, which is demo1jhook.org. Select that one. And after that, define simple record, and then click on create records over here. And here you can see our record has been created, which is this one. And with the help of this particular record, which is going to be our domain name, we should be able to access our web page. And here you can see demo1jhook.org index.html, which I would like to highlight over here, which is this one. And through this particular URL, we are able to access the home page of my static website. But keep in mind that although I have shown you that my website is accessible immediately, but it took around quite a significant time for me, around 15 to 20 minutes, because this domain name propagation which I have done or which could be done from DNS side from AWS will take a certain amount of a time. So this A record creation and this A record accessibility will not be that quick for you if you are doing it for the first time. So once you create an A record, then just be a little patient so that the DNS propagation works. And also there is a one DNS propagation website which I could show you, which is this one, and which you can use in your case, which is this one, demo DNS checker. So this DNS checker website will help you to locate the DNS setting for your particular domain. So try to check this particular website and enter your domain name so that you can check the validation whether your DNS has been propagated or not. So I hope this whole session will help you to deploy your static website using Route 53, CloudFront distribution, and S3 bucket. If you have any question, then please put down into the comment section below.